Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we are meeting with the company Codeword agency. They're a public relations and communications company. My name's Peyton. I'm with Kiln. We are a co-working space based out of Utah and Colorado. And we're really excited to be here with the Codeword team today to share a little bit about how to utilize PR for your startup. So before we get started, I'm just going to do a little introduction on everybody that's joining us today, and we'll kick it off. So first we have Kyle Monson. He's one of the Codeword partners. Kyle started his career as a tech journalist covering startups and consumer electronics for PC Magazine. He spent 12 years building comms and content programs for a wide range of tech companies, including Netflix, IBM, Microsoft, Snapchat, and decade-long relationships with Google and Qualcomm. He loves working with tech enthusiasts, communities, and bringing speed and transparency to corporate communications. Kyle is one of the most sought-after content strategists in the business and loves helping brands find their voice. And then we also have Maya here, Maya Kosoff. She's a senior editor with Codeword. Maya is a storyteller with over a decade of experience in journalism. She covered venture capital and startups at Business Insider, helped launch The Hive at Vanity Fair, where she was a tech reporter and has written for outlets including New York Times, Vogue, and New York Magazine. And then lastly, we have Josh Heath. He is a senior vice president at Codeword. He is a seasoned pro with 15 plus years of experience helping brands develop media-facing narratives focused on increasing brand awareness, driving adoption, and building thought leadership among key audiences. He has developed strategic campaigns for B2B and B2C brands like DigitalOcean, LiveView Technologies, Boeing, Vivid, and Databricks, among others. Josh is passionate about supporting community organizations like BLM Utah Room here with pro bono PR work and spends his time away from work coaching a high school mountain biking team. So thank you guys again so much for joining us. We're really excited to hear your thoughts. This is super relevant for our companies within Kiln, but also our greater ecosystem here in Utah and Colorado. So with that, I'll kick it off to you, Kyle, to get started.
Thanks, Peyton. That was great. Yeah, we're excited to be talking to you today. So thanks for joining us, Kiln friends. We're going to start with a little bit of an icebreaker. Love this little polar bear trying to break through and grab the fish. So icebreaker, the first lesson in PR, we want to know our audience. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. If you can take just a couple seconds, add a line or two to the chat about your experience working with PR. Was it terrible? Was it amazing? Have you done it before? Is this your first time thinking about PR for the startup you're working on? And then we can answer questions as we go. So please feel free as we're going through the presentation to chime in with any questions or thoughts, and we'll try and address them as we go. Yeah, we're excited to be talking to you today. We're going to talk about, we're going to share some kind of real talk about working with PR agencies. If you search in working with PR agencies in Google, you'll find like a zillion results. But some of that advice doesn't feel super real. So we're going to give you kind of the real skinny on what it's like to hire your first PR agency or work in PR for the first time, what it's like relating to the media right now, talking to the public and things like that. So lots of opportunities, lots of pitfalls, and we will talk through them all. So pretty excited about that today. Just in terms of a quick intro to the agency, we've been around for about 10 years. We're kind of a Goldilocks size agency. We're around 80 people right now. So there's a pretty wide spectrum of agencies that can support you, from very small shops, boutique firms, to very large global. We're kind of right in the middle, which is nice. A lot of us come from journalism backgrounds, including Maya and myself. We have a lot of media pros. We've got a full design team, video team, audience development experts, digital strategy. A lot of our clients come to us because they want to work with a PR agency. And then, as startups do, you find out they actually need quite a range of marketing services. So we've kind of expanded the agency to be able to support them. As Peyton was saying, the three of us on the call have spent our careers working with tech clients and especially startups, and we love it. It is a labor of love. I think you probably know as well as we do that, startup marketing is a pretty difficult space. In some cases, it might be the founder's first time running a business. It might be the CMO's first time running a marketing org or running an agency relationship. So, that doesn't impact the work that we do every day. We spend a lot of time on client education. Budgets and expectations tend to be all over the place. The highs are very high and the lows are very low, just like they are for our founders and clients. So, working with startups really is a labor of love. And after working with hundreds of startups over the past decade, we still really love it. I'll hand off to you, Josh, if you want to go through a few of the reasons why.
Yeah, like Kyle was saying, we really do love working with startups for a lot of reasons. I think really just because we have a direct impact with that company as they're growing. A lot of times they come to us, they're still a very small staff, and we can work directly with the executives and help them really kind of find their voice and find their footing as a startup. And that for us is really, really rewarding. And it's a bit of a high risk, high reward scenario, which we find to be most of the time pretty thrilling. We're kind of, I guess, adrenaline junkies in a weird kind of way. Also, just the innovative approach that startups have to the market. Most of the time when we're working with startups, they have a really cool product or idea or service that's either challenging existing brands or the status quo, and it's so fun to be a part of that story and help them do that. It's really one of my favorite parts of the job. Risk taking is fun too. A lot of times when we work with more established brands, they're a lot more risk adverse because they don't want to do anything to upset what's working. Whereas when we work with startups, they have a unique set of problems. And a lot of times we have to come at those problems with a really creative way of doing things and a creative way of preparing their messaging, which is really fun and really rewarding for us. And I've already talked about it a few times, but it's just a lot of fun working with startups. The energy is great. We love meeting the different people on the team who are super excited about this opportunity they have, and the founders who are really energized about this idea that they've been nurturing probably for many years, and now it's turning into a full-blown company, and maybe they have some funding, and they're really excited to be there, and so are we. We wanted to get into a little bit about what public relations is. Public relations is a lot of things, and I think first and foremost, the important thing to get out there is public relations is more than media relations. That is a huge part of what we do, and it's a very important part of what we do, but we do a lot more than that. We do help you get media coverage, get in the news. We work with social media a lot. Social media influencers help you kind of find your voice and your stride on social media. We work with different types of events and parties. Right now we're planning a party for one of our clients in the Bay Area, or I guess not a party, an event, a socially distanced event. We do a lot of speaking opportunities and speaker preparation and engagement. We develop your customer stories and case studies, really help you make good with your investors and make sure they love you and you have a good relationship. We help you work with analysts, and we do a lot of crisis comms. Some of the best work I've done that I'm the most proud of, no one can ever know about. And I really do like that. When sometimes it just happens, we need to help a company kind of protect their brand. And we really do find that kind of exciting and a bit of a challenge to overcome. And I think really at our best, what we're doing is we're helping you grow your business. We're helping build awareness for your company, absolutely. But we're also kind of helping you develop your voice, find who your persona is going to be, really kind of decide how you want to talk about some of these challenges in the market and approach these challenges in the market. And then we want to help you really just integrate your organization. A lot of times we help break down silos in some of these organizations as they grow and really integrate the overarching narrative into one, solid storyline that goes across the business. And that's really fun to do as we work with the different executives and members of your team. And then we love getting on the radar, helping you get on the radar of potential investors, especially in the Utah business community where so many people are looking to secure funding. That isn't something we have to do. A lot of our clients don't go after funding. They grow kind of organically, but we can also help you get on the radar with the right investors at the right time as well.
And
all right,
to talk about,
over to Maya.
Thank you. Yeah, to give some context for kind of the state of media right now, things are a bit of a mess. Since 2008, U.S. newspapers have lost half of their staff. In the last year alone, 37,000 media employees lost work. That means that more and more brands are competing for fewer and fewer journalists and their attention. So it's increasingly difficult and increasingly important to get the attention of these journalists. And then also, obviously, the landscape of social media platforms is constantly evolving. There's always a new platform to hit, to know about, to be on. And it's hard to know which of those channels and platforms are right for any particular brand as well. In addition, I think that the tech press and VCs, and I think this extends to some entrepreneurs as well, used to have a very amicable relationship. And especially in the past year and a half or so, that relationship has become more tense, more fraught, particularly as tech reporters have been doing more critical reporting of tech companies in a way that VCs and founders aren't really used to. In addition, you have this really high degree of media turnover and consolidation. There's always a media company being sold to a new private equity firm, like last week when TechCrunch's parent company, Verizon, sold its assets to Apollo. And that's going to continue happening. That's been happening for several years. So it kind of contributes to the concept of more brands trying to vie for the attention of a smaller pool of reporters.
And I think a big part of our role as, PR support is helping you navigate this kind of crazy world of the media, because it does change every day, especially if you came up, reading TechCrunch a few years ago, reading, The Verge and places like that. It was a different media environment than the one that you might be launching a company into right now in 2021, because of all the things that Maya just highlighted. It's tougher to get coverage. Announcements that might have gotten, a huge feature, in 2015 isn't even going to get any kind of coverage in 2021. So we really have our work cut out for us. The work isn't easy. It's always evolving. And we're here to help founders, CMOs, and startups kind of navigate this changing world.
A good example of that would have been about a year ago when media were really busy covering very important stories about markets collapsing and people getting really sick and pandemics happening. A lot of our clients were really worried about how they could get media coverage, and we had to come up in a lot of instances with completely new PR strategies to help them out, because some of the top tier business and tech were covering important stories that needed to be talked about, and they themselves were worried about their safety, their health, and their families. And so we really kind of had to help our clients in some cases develop a direct to customer message strategy that they could do that really helped them in the long run, and also go into some of the tech trades or vertical publications that weren't as impacted by the changes in the market. And so this is the kind of stuff we find ourselves as a PR agency constantly doing, is developing new strategies with the different twists and turns that happen with the media market. All right, now we kind of want to talk a little bit about if you're ready for public relations. This is a good question. I would say especially in the startup phase, we have a lot of discussions with startups, which I absolutely love. I love talking with startups, hearing about their solutions and what they're trying to accomplish. A lot of times, they come to us with more of a demand gen or a lead gen need, not necessarily a public relations need. So it's really important that as you start engaging an agency, you understand exactly what you need so that you can get what you want. Whatever winning is for you, that will actually happen. There's different ways to do that. A lot of times I would say, especially if you're a startup and you just secured like a Series A funding round or something like that, sometimes you don't need a PR agency to help you do that. These journalists like to hear from the CEO about your cool idea and like to hear your passion. And a lot of times if a company calls me up and all they have going on in that time frame is that funding announcement, I can just shoot them over a couple of emails of people who they can reach out to. And that way I don't have to charge them a lot of money for just one event, and they can get what they need to done. And we have a good friendship that will last hopefully a long time. So doing it yourself is a great idea to think about, especially if you're a bit budget conscious or tight with your budget there. In-house is also a great way to go. Bring someone internally on your team. This way you have someone who's 100% focused on you. They understand your brand, your ethos, everything you're about, and can work with you every day in, day out, to kind of be there for those important moments. The one mistake we see brands make when they go in-house, however, is they sometimes hire someone who's really fresh out of college or really new to PR. And the main issue you have here is when you're growing your business and you need someone who's going to be fiercely helping you grow your brand and protect it out in the wild, while this person out of college is usually very smart and competent, they just lack a little bit of experience. I would say if you're going to hire someone in-house, look for a mid-level to senior hire for this, because they can become that jack of all trades for you that can handle the different challenges that arise as your brand is growing and you're trying to change or pivot, as you do oftentimes as part of a startup.
Yeah, some companies stay in-house for a long time. Even some big tech companies like Google tends to do most of their PR in-house. It can be cheaper than an agency to hire an in-house team. I do think you miss out on some of the network benefits of having an agency. If you've got one or two comms folks on your staff, they're just not going to have the same breadth of relationships that an agency will have. And they'll probably have a little bit less specialization too. Like you can do the broad general comm stuff, but when you need specialty skills at the table, you're probably not going to get as much of that from an in-house team unless you're really scaling fast. But it is a good solution, as Josh was saying. You know, you can hire a good head of comms and they can work their magic for you for quite a while. They're good.
Yeah, a lot of times the head of comms, as we work with them, they become a quarterback for us and getting us the vital content we need in order to tell their story. And it's a great partnership as we work with them. I would say oftentimes as you scale, you keep that head of content and then you bring on an agency who they would work with directly. A freelancer is another great idea. Freelancers are going to cost less than an agency. At certain points in my career, I've freelanced and I have really enjoyed it. And I was able to have a very beneficial relationship with my clients because I was a lot less than the agency was. But also for me, because I didn't have a lot of overhead, it was very beneficial because for me, as far as making a decent amount of money goes. A lot of times an agency is or a freelancer is a bit more specialized, and they can provide you a lot of value, especially when it comes to like messaging, building your narrative and strategy. The one downside to a consultant sometimes is like what Kyle just said, the depth and breadth of what they could have relationship wise isn't there just because they're one person. But there are a lot of freelancers that we work with that I recommend to people who are amazing at their jobs, and it's definitely a great route to go. Your investor's PR team. This is also a great way to go. A lot of times, this is a bit of a newer trend, but a lot of times the different VCs you'll be working with have their own PR team that's just meant to help their portfolio companies grow. They're a great resource for you. The one thing to consider there is typically they're managing a lot of different portfolio companies, and so they're a very limited resource. But if you're trying to put out some news about the funding announcement or some other things you might be doing, they can help you out, but you'll end up doing probably a lot of the work yourself just because they're so strapped for time. But it's a great resource. And definitely if you want to have communication as part of what you're doing, it doesn't hurt to look for an investment partner who has that resource for you in-house. A local agency is another great idea. The one thing that's nice about a local agency versus a larger agency, we'll get into in a minute, is that typically they're a bit of a smaller team, a little bit less overhead, and they cost a little bit less. Somewhere in the price range of $5K versus a larger national agency that would be with a minimum of 10 to 15K. It's sky's the limit from there. So a local agency is great. The downside there is typically they're pretty locally focused and might not have the same kind of contacts that a larger national agency would have. But there are some great local agencies that we work with a lot of times that do really good work and they cost a little bit less. And so if you're looking for a stopgap before you get to a larger agency, I feel like a local agency could be a great way to go in that kind of 5 to 7K kind of price range for your budget. And then national agency, Codeword, of course, we're a national agency with agency partners around the world. The pro for working with someone like a national agency like us is we have deep resources. Kyle kind of talked to us a little bit. We have a design team. We have an awesome editorial team made up of largely of ex-former journalists who are just really good at the job, like Maya, who's on the call today. And we can do a lot for you. A lot of times a client comes to us with a very big PR problem, and we just go, shoulder down. We get that done for the first 3 to 4 months, and then they come back to us and say, okay, we kind of saw that problem. Now we have this other problem that's not necessarily a PR problem, it's a content problem or a demand gen problem. And then we can pivot or add that kind of product or service to what we're doing for them to help them out. And we're not just completely focused on one tactic or another. We have a lot of things we can do as a company grows. We've helped a lot of companies grow from Series A through exit. And so we also understand what that looks like and some of the services you'll be needing. And we can be a great, not only just a media relations firm, but an amazing content strategist team, business strategist team, because we've been there and we've helped companies grow before. And I think that's a really cool asset that we bring to the table along with other national PR agencies.
Okay, let's get into some secret stuff.
Yeah,
secrets, the things that agencies don't tell you. If you're going to hire an agency like Codeword, few things that you should know. You don't want to be the smallest or the largest client on the agency roster. And you can ask agencies that, and they will usually tell you, if they're going to be good partners, they'll tell you kind of where you sit in the range. If you're the smallest client on the roster, you're probably not going to get the A team. Just facts of life. If you're the largest client on the agency's roster, they probably, yes, you'll get the A team, but they might not have all the skills that you need to really do your work. You might be operating at a higher level than they're used to working with their other clients. So find an agency where you're in their kind of budgetary sweet spot, and they'll build a great team for you. The other thing, agencies do take time and effort to manage. If you don't have someone to manage it, it's going to be a really difficult relationship. Some founders and startups think that they can outsource all of their marketing to an agency. That's pretty hard for the agency because we're not sitting with you every day. We're not as embedded with the company as, an in-house CMO might be. So if you're going to hire an agency, especially like, a bigger national agency, you're going to want someone to manage them. Ideally that's a head of comms. If not, we deal with CMOs sometimes. When we deal directly with founders, it's a little tough because it does take a lot of the founders' time away from the bigger problems that the founders should be solving around product development, building the business, signing partnerships, things like that. Here's another dirty secret. Agencies, we all hire from the same talent pool. And we're not actually that differentiated. The employees at agency X will be at agency Y next year, and they'll be at agency Z the year after that. And agency Y's employees will be at agency X. It's just kind of a merry-go-round in a fairly small industry, to be honest. So what matters most, agency reputation does matter. If you hear from a friend that they had a really good experience working with an agency, that's cool. But the thing that matters most is actually who is on your account team. Like, who are the specific people at the agency that are working on your business? The biggest differentiator between a good agency experience and a bad agency experience is having someone at the agency that really gives a shit about you and is going to stay up nights and, get your texts at midnight and respond quickly. And someone who knows their shit, knows the industry, knows what they're talking about, and that you trust. That really is the difference. And if you find an agency where you've got that account lead that really loves you, you click with them, they're getting the results that you need, then you're in a pretty good spot. If you don't trust your account lead, here's the other secret. You can ask them off. You can talk to the agency lead and say, hey, I'm not really gelling with this person. They're not really addressing my needs. If it's a good agency like Codeword, we want to keep our clients happy. We want to show results for you and show that we're delivering on your marketing investment. So, we'll swap out leads if they're not clicking right. We want to build the team that really gels and shows results for the clients. For you as a founder and a client, it is so much easier to replace your account lead at the agency than to go through the agency search process again. You're going to do an RFP. You're going to, look at a whole bunch of different agencies and vet their skills all over again. And then you're probably going to end up with a roughly similar team because, again, we're all hiring from the same talent pool. So find an account lead that you really care about and that really cares about you, and then you're golden. Another little secret of the industry, the agency market is super, super hot right now. We have way more inbound business leads than we can handle right now. So it's much more about vetting the right client opportunities than just saying yes to everyone that comes in and wants to write us a check. I think that's the case for most startup agencies at the moment. And that's partly tied to VC funding. In the first half of 2020, the VC market cooled off a little bit. The marketing dollars, and that pipeline kind of slowed down a little bit. And now that we were in the back half of 2020, now into 2021, obviously the VC market is as hot as it's ever been, which does have, downstream impacts on the agency world. So just be cognizant as you talk to agencies, as you do your agency search, they're talking to 50 other companies as well. And you're not going to have the bargaining power that you might have had, say, a year ago. The last one, good CMOs already know this, and good head of comms and good CEOs. But if you want your agency to ride or die for you and bleed and sweat and cry real tears, just give them a compliment once in a while. It really does, more than the money, more than success with the media, more than anything else. When the client says something nice to you, it makes your whole week. The team gets super energized. They're going to hustle, 20% harder than they would otherwise. It's just the way the world works and the way people are. So that's just a few secrets about hiring an agency. We're going to do a Q&A in a few minutes, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have about any of this or any others about the hiring process, because it is changing quite a lot, especially this year.
One thing to add to that on the trust side too is I can't emphasize enough how important it is. There's a mutual trust between you and your agency, both you trusting them to be there for you, to pick up the phone when you call, to help you through a crisis, but also that they can trust you. The one unique thing about a PR agency versus other vendors that you might use is we are the one marketing function that's out there literally defending your brand. out in the wild and helping it grow. We get real time, sometimes harsh, but necessary feedback from reporters and other industry insiders. It's important that we can trust you enough too to bring that to you and kind of talk about what we can do to change perceptions and even strategies. A lot of times, the hardest thing we have to do as a PR agency is tell our client that the story they put together sucks. And it can be a really hard truth because they think it's really important, and it is important, but there's maybe one or two different elements we can add to it or to make it a little bit better. And so it's really important that we have this kind of a safe environment where we can talk to each other and strategize about the narrative and the story to make it the final product that leaves really, really good. And ultimately, at the end of the day, of course, you're the client, will do what you want to do, but it's really important that we can have that discussion and we can talk openly and honest with you about those kind of things.
Maya's going to talk in a few minutes about what a sucky story looks like.
Yeah. I think that's too. It's a dirty secret about public relations that a lot of times agents won't tell you, is that media relationships are very important, and we have them. We use them a lot, but they're also in a state of flux right now. So the most important thing we can do for you is develop a good story first. If I can't go to any of my media contacts with a B story, it has to be an A story. Otherwise, I stop becoming a trusted resource for them. And so first and foremost, our job is to help put together a really cool story that our relationships are going to want. And there's a good chance as the media market tends to flux and change a little bit, some of our contacts will either become PR people and work with us or else go to another publication as well. So a couple of questions I think that are really good for you to ask yourself before you engage an agency. And I think one thing to add to these questions is, if you're not sure, feel free to reach out to us or another agency anytime, but we're happy to kind of walk you through this. And most of the time we get on the call with a startup, we tend to go through a lot of these questions anyway, just to make sure that they're ready for us. Because what we don't want to have happen is in 3 months to have either us or you be frustrated because you're not getting what you wanted, mostly because you didn't know what you wanted in the first place. And so a really important question is, do we know who we are yet as a brand? We know we have a product. Do we know who we are? Do we know what our why is? Why are we doing this? What's our ethos going to be? A good agency can help you figure this out. We actually spend a lot of time with a lot of our clients before you even begin media relations in some aspects, helping them kind of determine their brand narrative and voice. Do you understand our sales cycle? It's really common that the companies come to us, and while public relations isn't necessarily a lead gen tool, it's more of a brand awareness tool. It does help with demand gen and lead gen secondarily. It's really hard for us to help with that, though, if you don't understand what your sales cycle is and how we can help along that road, especially if you're an enterprise tech play. That sales cycle tends to be a lot more long and drawn out, and it's really important that we can either help you define that as we work together, or understand how it works so we can understand how to better support your sales team. Have you really clearly identified who your audience is yet, your core customer? This is a really important thing. We've had a lot of clients come to us with new application, a new product or service that's awesome and that fits a need, but they really haven't figured out who's going to buy it yet. And it's really important as we develop your messaging and your narrative that we know exactly who that's for and who we're writing to. Again, that's something we can help you figure out, but it's really important that we understand your audience as we're preparing that narrative, because we want to work with media who write to your audience. And so if we don't understand who your audience is, it's really hard for us to find the right media as we do that. Do we have clear, measurable objectives in place? What do we want to accomplish with a public relations agency? Is really important. Is it just brand awareness and the sheer number of coverage that happens every year, or do you want to get more specific in how much traffic are we generating to the website? How is that translating into deal flow? A good agency can provide all this measurement for you and metrics for you if you need that. And a lot of times we actually help our clients figure out what these objectives are, so we can start benchmarking that and helping them grow. And we can say, hey, this actually is working very well for you. We should do more of it. This isn't. We should do less of that.
I think we'll help guide you, especially in the early stages as your corporate objectives evolve. We also frequently see VCs play a big role in the early stages of the objectives. Like, your investors are going to come to you with asks and requests and expectations around, your company launch, funding round announcements, things like that. And in some cases, they just want to see that you can get good press and that journalists are interested in you and that you're starting to build the right media relationships. So we'll be transparent with you about how we can, help address those early stage goals.
Yeah, exactly. Another question asked too is, how robust is your news pipeline? Do you have a lot of announcements coming up after this first big announcement that you brought us on for? Well, a lot of times this is very common. We get a phone call from a new business, a client that wants us to help them with a funding announcement. Their hair's on fire. They've got to get it out next week. And we ask them what they have after that, and they go, we don't know. Maybe you don't want to work with us. if that's the case. So anyway, that's kind of how that goes. Sorry, my computer just popped up a weird screen on me. So another thing too is time. Cal kind of touched on this, but it does take some time. You invest money in an agency as well as time. We try our very best to make sure that we treat the amount of time you have to work with us very carefully, and we don't take advantage of any of that, because we know how busy you are. I was talking with an entrepreneur yesterday. He's like, how much time do I have to give you guys? I'm in the middle of developing this product. It's all I had time to do. And we kind of had to discuss how we could best use him and keep his time sacred so that he could focus on product development, because that's what he was good at. And we had a great discussion about that. And the other thing is budget. I think budget is a really big indicator. If an agency asks you for $10,000 a month, and that's like a huge amount of money for you, you should probably not pay them that much money. You should work with a freelancer, or you should work with an in-house person, because if that's like the biggest investment you have across all your marketing channels, and you're expecting these amazing things to happen out of it, a lot of times you can be disappointed, especially early on. We try our very best to get quick wins for you and to make sure you're very happy with things, but it does take a little bit of time to get a really strong PR plan and campaign up and running for a brand. It's not binary like some other marketing functions are. It takes a minute to build up some steam.
And it's also, if you can go back to the preceding slide for just one more second. The nice thing is the marketing world's fairly small. We know most of the other PR agencies in our space. We know lots of consultants. So, if you're talking to an agency or a consultant and the budget's not right, if you're clear with them that, you're looking for something different, they'll usually help you source someone else who's going to be a better fit for you. And Codeword's the same way. We talk to lots of clients every week who, can't afford us, or we're not the right fit, or for whatever reason. And most of us are pretty good about, winning those karma points and sending you in a healthier direction with someone who's going to be a better fit.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We do that all the time. And usually it turns back around and people come back to us. So we have clients who we sent to a freelancer 2 or 3 years ago, and now they want to work with us and they have bigger budgets, and we're happy to do that. All right, now we want to talk a little bit about, is your story newsworthy? I'll turn the time over to Maya to kind of explain her perspective here.
Yeah, so I think that there's often a chasm between what founders think is newsworthy and what journalists think is newsworthy. So this is a bit of perspective about what journalists want stories about and what they deem newsworthy. It's really helpful to pitch a reporter if you have credible industry data that you can provide them. They'll be, in my personal experience, much more likely to take you seriously and to kind of, it's very easy to pitch someone without any hard numbers backing up what you're saying, but when you have those numbers, it helps immensely. Journalists also want stories of news that impacts your customers or your market. So, any kind of news that you can provide obviously would be helpful when you're pitching a journalist. Anything topical or timely, kind of along those same lines. The news cycles, a million things happen in a day, and you want something to break through the noise and to be topical and timely. They're storytellers. They love conflict, drama, tension, and surprise. So if your pitch contains any of those elements, or your news story or news item for them contains any of those elements, you're much more likely, I believe, to get a response than if it's boring. Along those same lines, reporters love an emotional hook. They love them. So if you can tug at their heartstrings, all the better. They also want.
What's an example? Can you talk a little bit more about what an emotional hook might look like?
Yeah, I think that if there's a story that involves I don't think that founder stories are often the best, but I think that one way that you can humanize founders is by telling a story of a personal obstacle that they overcame or something like that, and that's in my opinion very compelling and a good example of one of these emotional hooks. Or for example, if the product or service or startup that you are pitching has played a foundational role in the lives of in someone's life in a way that is compelling and not corny or overstated or overwrought, I think that that could also be compelling. And then also journalists want stories that connect to the lives of their audiences. They're writing for a specific outlet, and you can know to tailor those pitches to those specific outlets. If you have a story that works particularly well for one kind of audience, you might want to consider pitching a reporter who works or writes for that publication. And then on the flip side of this, there are elements that journalists don't want in their stories.
Sorry, it's going backwards for some reason.
All good. So there's a bunch of things that journalists also don't care about. You might think that these are interesting, and that's great, but in terms of pitching reporters, stay away from them. So the first one is journalists often don't care about your origin story. They don't. They hear it all the time. They've heard so many versions of the same kind of story, and they are not likely to write a story about your origin story. That is not compelling to them. They also don't care about topics or beats that they don't cover. If you are pitching a consumer social app, don't contact the Apple reporter at a newspaper. That's not the right person to contact. Do a quick Google search and you can quickly figure out like who the right person is. And, you know, following these people on Twitter, I think also gives you a very good sense of the ecosystem and can kind of help you know who to pitch or who not to pitch, or who the right person is to talk to for your story. And you probably, if your company does a specific thing, you probably want a list of reporters who cover that specific thing that you want to kind of have in your back pocket to reach out to when there's a newsworthy moment. Journalists also don't really care about like incremental company updates or new product features unless it's groundbreaking in some way. Unless you're Instagram, I don't think that you're going to be getting a bunch of news stories about new product features that you're launching. So it may, again, these things may be interesting to you, and they may very well be very interesting to a lot of people, but like journalists probably won't write about them. Journalists also don't really care about new hires. You might have hired the best human resources rock star in the world, but unless it is Kanye West, I don't think that reporters are necessarily going to pick up on it and write about it.
Kanye
that
West
is just
HR, as an
yeah,
HR.
yeah, yeah. That would be a big story for many reasons. I think we could all. Journalists also don't really care about funding rounds unless they specifically cover funding rounds. There's specific reporters who cover VC news, who cover funding. But a lot of publications also kind of have rules around that. I think, and I can kind of speak to this from personal experience, when I was at Business Insider in the mid-aughts, or mid-2010s rather, there was kind of a boom of funding, and every story was a funding story, and we kind of had to put rules in place being like, we're not covering funding news unless it's an exclusive, or unless it's a really big amount of money, or it's a really interesting investment. So, and I think that has kind of become commonplace at many outlets. I don't think that, except for with the exceptions of like Crunchbase or TechCrunch or some of these places, or specific reporters who cover these things, like Alex Conrad at Forbes writing about VC stuff. You know, there are people to pitch and people not to pitch, and typically funding stories are just not of interest to the everyday tech reporter. I think because they're so commonplace, you know, if you've raised $5 billion, so have all of these other companies. It's just not big news to them. They're quite jaded.
Yeah, that threshold keeps going up too. Where would you, Josh, based on our recent work, where would you put the number at now? Where we think like, oh, that round's newsworthy?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the round for sure, but a Series A round, you're looking at somewhere north of 15K. Depending on the only caveat I would add to that would be like, if that's the only thing that makes you special is a funding round, then it's really hard to get anyone to care. So you should really think like, we're a really special company. This is why we're special. And by the way, we've closed this funding round. That's how you have to look at that news, because the funding round by itself is, unless it's a lot of money, it's not going to get you like top billing. And even if it gets you something, it's probably going to be a quick write-up, not really an in-depth story about what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and there's a lot that goes into those stories, like who your investors are. You know, have you exited before? You know, what was your last job? Was that a big deal? Did you get a lot of coverage for that? Do you have relationships? Like some VC firms have really great media relationships, and they can pull some levers on the back end to get coverage lined up. A lot of them don't have that kind of pull. So yeah, that number it keeps going up over time, just because there's more and more VC investment happening.
One thing I would add to that right now is give the reporter 2 to 3 weeks to write a story right now. We put out really amazing funding stories in the recent past, and because our client didn't let us know until the last minute, or it was a new client that was with their hair on fire trying to get this thing out, the reporters simply didn't have enough time to write that story in the queue of all the things they're already working on. And so if you really want to get a good, well thought out story, give us 3 to 4 weeks to pitch that out right now on a funding. If it's a funding story alone, that's really important. It's a long time. We realize that, but that's just what we're seeing.
Yeah. And I think that was a good point, that the funding news on its own might not be interesting. That might be like a deal sweetener or like an extra detail that you might want to include in a pitch that's more kind of fully formed or thought out for a reporter as extra information for them. And then finally, journalists do not care about jargon. Their eyes will glaze over. They will delete your email. They will not read your pitch if it is super jargon heavy. So talk to them like they are a human being, because they are. And I think that's about it if we want to move on to Q&As, unless you guys have anything else to add.
I think there's 2 things to add to that. One, first of all, this is awesome. Thank you very much. The biggest conflict we have, especially with startups as an agency, is comparing yourself to other really established brands or people. We have some amazing people in the Utah market, especially, have done some amazing things. They've grown a few different companies, and they're in a really great place. What you don't see sometimes is that is a product of years and years, a decade plus of media relations, of building relationships, of a lot of things that have happened on the back end, and a lot of money that's been spent. And so oftentimes we get getting a claim, well, this person just did this thing and someone covered it. Yeah, it's because it's that person and it's that company who's worth, a lot of money. And so it's really important that we realize, and we help you set these expectations going into things as well. And the one thing, just to second what Maya said on the funding stuff, one of my favorite stories from recent past is we worked with a company who was a unique coding bootcamp company. There's tons of coding bootcamp companies. They had a unique approach to it that made them different. And they were closing a funding round. And the number wasn't spectacular. It wasn't something that I figured we can get a hook with some of these reporters who cover funding. And so we had to come at it in a different way. And they just finished graduating their first class of people to this boot camp. And these are people who were, blue collar workers, didn't have access to the types of funds that you typically need to get this kind of training. And we told their stories. One of them just happened to be like a custodian at Google who is now getting a job, a 6-figure salary, developing at Google. And so we made it the human interest story about how these humans have been impacted by this really cool service. And that story had legs, and the funding was a footnote. I mean, they put it in there, but they really loved that story. It got picked up by Fast Company and a few other tier 1 business publications. And we were really happy with that. So you definitely want to make sure and listen to your PR person when they tell you these things, because they know what they're talking about. They've been pitching stories to TechCrunch, every other week for the past year, and they understand what they're looking for. And they're the ones who are getting yelled at by reporters because what they've given them isn't good enough, even though they're trying their best. So they know what they're talking about. So listen to them. And like Kyle says, tell them thank you occasionally. It's nice to feel pretty, is all, so make sure and let us know.
So just to sum up the presentation, your PR agency is always right. You don't thank them enough, and you should pay them more money because it's a hot market right now. All right, Peyton, what softball questions do you have for us?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my gosh, so great. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate those insights, even, from our perspective and a lot of different things we've been evaluating at Kiln and the level that we're at. This was super helpful. One of my questions for you guys is, if I'm going to engage in an agency, right? Like, we've gone through all these kind of discovery aspects of asking ourselves questions if we're ready for it and we are ready to engage. How many of those newsworthy stories should we have in the queue to get started? And then how many stories do you typically see that you're sending out for startups annually? That's a really good question. And I think part of our job is to help craft the stories ourselves. So I don't think you need to come to us with a ready-made box of stories with a bow on it. We hold ourselves responsible to help you shape those, even during periods when you don't have a lot to talk about. In those moments, we can respond to trends. We can work with you to develop reports or do analyst relations, media partnerships. There's a lot we can do, even if you don't have any news, to get yourself out there in the media. But Josh, it does help to have a single, we want to get this story done in the next 90 days. Let's jam on this together. And just, out of the gates to have a good story or a good announcement or something like that to talk about. Josh, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and typically an outcome for a lot of our startups, story-wise, I would say a year is anywhere in the, I would say at the least probably 60 stories a year, but on the high end, it's hundreds of stories a year we can put out. It really depends on how many stories we can work with you to kind of, write and pitch and how much time you have to give to us and kind of what you have going on. a lot of our teams are really good, like Kyle said, at getting news when you don't have news. Getting out and doing media briefings, looking at the trends and kind of making sure you're part of those conversations and the trend jacking side of things. There's a lot we can do. So yeah, you don't need to have a huge amount of stories in your queue, but I would say the main question to ask is how interesting is our story and how much are we willing to actually put ourselves out there to work with an agency to do this?
Yeah, and your agency will work with you on that, especially if you come to them transparently and you're like, look, I don't have that much to talk about. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
That's a good brief. The agency can take that brief and do a lot with it. But it does help to be transparent about that. And also, set your expectations accordingly. If you don't have a lot to talk about, the agency is going to have to work really hard for all the coverage they get for you.
And just understand that exactly. We have an amazing team of data analysts who we can, and strategists who we can work with to really dive into your industry, find out what's hot, what's being talked about, and really jam on those stories for you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you. My next question was, as a business, how can we make sure that we're nurturing our investment in PR? Like, what are things that these startups and businesses can be doing to making sure that they're getting, the best return on their investment for PR?
Yeah, that's a question that we talk about a lot, especially when we're talking to new clients. It is hard, especially in the startup space, because a lot of CMOs in the startup space are coming from performance marketing or user acquisition or brand advertising backgrounds, and PR is not like any of those things. Like, we don't actually have that. With performance marketing, user acquisition, advertising, you can pay a certain amount of money and basically get guaranteed a certain level of results. With PR, we don't actually control the end product. The journalist does and the media does in most cases. So return on investment is a big question. And, we do try and tie into your sales data and your sales team, especially if our data analytics team that Josh was talking about, some of our clients give us access to like their website, for instance, and then we can track, okay, you had a great review in Wirecutter. It drove this much traffic over the weekend. We did this affiliate partnership to drive sales. It drove this many sales last month. Over the last quarter, we've gotten this level of coverage for you, and it's led to this level of results. You're hearing from your sales team that, this top of the funnel PR activity is driving bottom of the funnel results for your sales team. That's all great. It is a hard thing to measure, and every client does it just a little bit differently. The one thing that I do feel pretty strongly about is that you should be getting an outsized return on your investment for PR. If you're just if you're paying your agency $10K a month in agency fees and you feel like you're getting $10K in value back, you might want to think about shaking things up a little bit, because PR really can, make unicorns. And I think that's what we're typically aiming for the right kind of client is if we put you on the map, if we get you the right coverage, can we make your brand famous? Can we do that top of the funnel work that's really going to make you, I hate to say household name, but a household name among your potential customers. And we measure that stuff with share of voice, especially compared to your competitors, mind share, inbound qualified leads, things like that. Josh, anything that you'd want to add to that? I was kind of rambling.
Yeah, I would say this is probably, when it comes to engaging an agency, the number one mistake that brands make, especially when a brand comes to us it's been working with another agency and is frustrated and wants to work with us. A lot of times agencies actually been doing really great work for them, but the measurement they've been giving back to them is not on par as what it should be. So make sure, and especially in the first month of your conversations, you have clearly defined what winning is for you. Like Kyle says, if you come from a demand gen, lead gen, customer acquisition background, and you're working with a PR agency, we tend to speak different languages. And so it's really important that you have communicated to us what winning is for you, and that we understand what that means. And if customer acquisition is super important to you, we need to make sure we have metrics put in place so that we can track that for you. And if we want to track, specific conversations and how your mind share is growing amongst certain types of audiences, we can do that as well. But what's awful is when we present to a client, this doesn't happen very often, but we say, here's this amazing results we have for you, and they say to us, this isn't what I wanted. So we have to go back and rephrase that. So I would say make sure it's super clear what you want, and that when you set your KPIs and when you see the actual scorecard that they've given you, okay, here's our goals for Q1. that those make sense to you. And if you have any questions, ask and get that clarified, because that can, I would say that's the number one thing that can help us solidify a long-lasting partnership and drive wins for you, because we want to make you famous. We want to make your CEO so happy that you brought us on board that they're going to give you a raise. And so we want to make you look great for bringing us on board. That's part of our objective.
Yeah, and building the value of your brand and your company, which I think is a function of PR. You know, these sky-high valuations that we're seeing in the startup market, a lot of that is PR driven. So you can get a huge amount of return on investment with the right PR agency that's getting you the right kinds of coverage and awareness building.
Yep. And if you don't know what to ask for, talk to us. Even if you're working with a different agency or a different PR team, I'm happy to talk to you anytime about what those goals are for you and clarify that so that you're happy with what you're getting. It's very frequent that someone will come to me and say, I'm not happy with my agency. I want to work with you. And I tell them, look, your agency is actually doing really great work for you. I could do that. I could do the exact same if you'd like, or you can just talk to them about measurement so that you're happy and just, you know, and if you're still not happy with that, then come to me and we'll have another conversation. But I don't want to take you away from them just because of semantics.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. I had a question that was similar to Peyton's first question. Where do you prefer to meet companies in their business development, or how much do you help with the development? Say they come to you without a mission statement. Do you kind of help develop that sort of path, or would you prefer that they have certain things already ready to go?
That's a great question. I would say we work with companies at every probably possible destination there. Like, we have companies come to us like, we don't know what we want to do yet. Can you help us with our brand messaging, brand narrative, and help us build out KPIs? And we can do that. And we spend a month or two with them before we really start engaging externally. And we love those relationships. They worked very well for us. And then we have clients who come to us, they've already had an agency or two, and they're very sophisticated, and we can jump right in and work with them too. So any agency who is on a larger size should probably work with you at those different levels.
It's kind of like when you hire someone, like entry level clients. Like, if you're the first client they've ever worked with, it's usually a little bit more difficult. You have more education to do, more training to do, but that work's really fun too. You know, we've gone all the way back to like naming, brand identity, you know, companies that come to us with, you know, a proof of concept product, but really nothing else. And then we have a lot of branding and development work to do with them. Those are really fun, but it does take a lot of work, and it's a lot, you know, long timeline. Sometimes, you know, we worked with one company for 18 months before they even launched on just branding and identity development while they were building their finished product. But the easier relationships are the ones where, you know, we're their second agency. You know, some other poor agency has had to do all the dirty work of, you know, setting expectations and education and things like that. So we've done both, Bella, and I think we're happy to talk to clients at both phases of their, you know, company life cycle.
I would say the only caveat to that is if you're coming to us and you have none of that figured out yet, you can't expect to get to like front page of the Wall Street Journal in the first month. That's going to take some time to get you there. So.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I just know, speaking for myself, I have lots of ideas, no clue where to start. So just want to put it out there that you don't have to be scared, you know, to reach out to an agency and see where you are and how they can help you. So,
and I can give you free advice all day. There's no pressure on me for free advice. I can say all kinds of stuff. So call me, we'll have a conversation anytime.
Okay, awesome. I know we have a couple other people on the call. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Thank you seriously so much for doing this with us today, for sharing about what you guys recommend and all that you do. So how would you ask that people reach out to you if they are interested in learning more?
Hit us up at hello@codewordagency.com.
Yep.
That's a friendly way to meet us, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll let everybody know that, and be sure to keep in touch. So thank you so much for sharing today. Really, really appreciate all of your insights. So
thanks for having us.